Exploring and settling the Old West was a tough job. The pioneers of the West had to be resourceful and creative to survive as they settled the western frontier. They faced long, harsh journeys with no guarantee their supplies would last to their final destination. So they got creative in a culinary sense. Pioneer cuisine may seem strange to us today, but the settlers had no choice but to use what they had to survive and improvise as needed. Today, we're looking at the menu of strange foods pioneers ate in the Old West. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other food-related history you'd like to hear about. Oh, Cookie's done some cooking. Come and get it. Everyone loves gelatin desserts, right?
Put my stuff in Jell-O again.
The pioneers certainly did. Unfortunately, no one would invent Jell-O until 1897, so they improvised by making calf's foot jelly. It was an inexpensive dessert that was easy to prepare. The recipe is simple. Just mix some eggs, lemon, sugar, and spices together. Oh, and don't forget to boil several calves' feet to create the gelatin. Once the gelatin cools, mix it into the egg and sugar blend, and you've got yourself a genuine Old West treat. Some Old West cooks took things up a notch by adding white wine, seasonings, and egg whites to the recipe. One Virginia recipe book even suggests crushing the eggshells and adding them to the mixture. The most in-depth recipe, however, came from Home Cookery, a collection of tried receipts, both foreign and domestic, by Mrs. J. Chadwick in 1853. Boil 4 feet in 1 gallon of water till reduced to 2 quarts. Strain and let stand overnight. Take off the fat and add to the jelly 1 pint of wine, the juice of 4 lemons, and the whites of 8 eggs. Stir it well together and sweeten to your taste. Let it boil for half an hour, then skim and put into a flannel bag to drain. Should it run through in a stream, it must be returned again and again until it will pass the bag only in quick drops. Just like me mum used to make. The sweet version of calf's foot jelly was popular in the Old West, but savory versions of the dish called picha existed long before the frontier days. The dessert doesn't come up much in modern discussion, but picha is still available as a made-to-order dish at New York's 2nd Avenue Deli and at least one kosher deli in Miami. Starting your day with a fresh cup of the most delicate dark roast wasn't always possible on the American frontier. Real coffee was a bit scarce in the Old West, so quick-thinking pioneers found many substitutes when they couldn't have the real thing. Everything from chicory roots to acorns could be ground up and used to make a coffee substitute. Pioneers derived one of the more creative coffee alternatives from sweet potatoes. Pioneers would peel, cook, mash, and dry the sweet potatoes before forming them into patties. They'd mix the patties with rye flour, dry them in an oven, and finally grind them into a powder. Sweet potatoes weren't an ideal substitute for coffee, but the drink had a few fans. One December 1861 recipe from Georgia's The Albany Patriot suggests mixing the powder with a small amount of coffee. Peel your potatoes and slice them rather thin. Dry them in the air or on a stove. Then cut into pieces small enough to go into the coffee mill. Then grind it. 2 tablespoons full of ground coffee and 3 or 4 of ground potatoes will make 8 or 9 cups of coffee. Clear, pure, and well tasted. Maybe the best part of waking up in the Old West was sweet potato in your cup. Most of us often dine on roast beef or roast chicken today, but would probably never consider taking a bite out of Pepe Le Pew, despite his perversion of wanting you to do so. But the pioneers didn't have much choice in the matter. Many pioneers survived on eating what they could find, trap, or hunt out in the wilderness. Skunks live in several habitats across the US, Canada, and Mexico, so it was only a matter of time before the stinky critters found themselves in hot water. Literally. Skunks provide a surprisingly decent amount of meat, though not as much as a sheep or pig. One old pioneer recipe book includes instructions for roast skunk, noting cooks should remove the scent glands before roasting, which is smart. And skunk, if you don't know, is best served with carrots. You likely won't find a roast skunk on a restaurant's menu today, but that hasn't stopped folks from trying it more recently. According to a 1959 issue of Boy's Life magazine, the meat is light and well-flavored and tastes better than raccoon or possum. Well, I guess William Howard Taft just disliked our video. Pioneers had no shortage of ingenuity when it came to making desserts, especially lemon pie. Despite a few attempts at growing them in California during the mid-1700s, lemons weren't common in the West until the mid to late 19th century. To get around their scarcity, pioneers once again made substitutions in their recipes. They took advantage of the leaves of the sheep sorrel, a small flowering plant in the same family as buckwheat. Sheep sorrel was native to the area, so it was much easier to find than actual lemons. Cooks would shred the leaves and bake them into a pie, giving the pastry a tart, delicious flavor. Sure, it's not lemon meringue, but it'll do in a pinch. There's nothing quite like the cool, refreshing taste of tartness. Fresh produce like apples weren't always readily available in the Old West. Pioneers sometimes compensated by using apple cider vinegar to flavor desserts. Primarily used for medicine or cleaning during the period, apple cider vinegar occasionally came in handy for flavoring a pie. The tart apple or citrus flavor of vinegar pie was close enough to an actual pie to satisfy travelers on the wagon trail. Vinegar pie is still prepared in modern kitchens today. Martha Stewart even has a recipe for this fine pioneer pie that involves plenty of flour, vinegar, sugar, spices, and butter, instead of the lard the pioneers probably used. After a day of hard work exploring the western frontier, there's nothing better than a fine bowl of your favorite stew. Despite its quirky name, Son of a Bitch Stew is a testament to the pioneer attitude of wasting nothing. It was also an efficient way of using parts of the young steer that couldn't be easily preserved. SOB stew was a mix of lean beef, calf liver and heart, bone marrow, sweetbreads, and brain, all chopped up into small pieces and boiled. Then the pioneers seasoned it with a blend of salt, pepper, and hot sauce to add some flavor. It was a practical cowboy dish in a time when every morsel counted, but it's probably not a recipe you'd want to find in a modern meal kit today. Just like coffee and fresh produce, traditional flour wasn't always available to pioneers. Instead, they turned to ingredients like corn and acorns to make bread. The idea of using ground acorns as flour wasn't anything new, but they were abundant in the West and made an excellent substitute. Producing the flour required roasting the acorns to remove their natural bitterness, then grinding them into a fine meal. Pioneers could use the acorn flour with other ingredients to make bread or just about any additional baked goods requiring flour. Everyone had a different method of catching and preparing food in the Old West. Eating on the Wild Side, a wild game cookbook, collected several appetizing recipes born from these methods. One such culinary delight was bear head cheese. Despite a somewhat misleading name, head cheese is not actually cheese. Instead, it's a meticulously prepared dish made from leftover meat from the head and face region of an animal. The meat is soaked in brine overnight, rinsed, and boiled down. Next, it's chopped and seasoned before being cooled in a pan or mold. Some head cheese recipes used a type of savory gelatin called aspic. After that, it's merely a matter of slicing and eating. The size of a bear meant it provided a significant amount of meat for pioneer families. Making head cheese helped them preserve every good part of the animal and have extra food for a long journey. And if you find yourself with a hankering for head cheese, or brawn, as our British friends call it, today just head down to your local grocery store. Following the honorable tradition of head cheese, prairie or mountain oysters are an infamous dish in the American West. More commonly known as Rocky Mountain oysters or cowboy caviar, people make the dish using
testicles.
Tell them why yours are so tasty.
Well, the trick is you've got to clip them off way up high.
bull calf testicles that are skinned and deep fried. In the Old West, cowboys and ranchers experimented with different meat cuts in their search for inexpensive food. They eventually discovered cooking and eating that particular part of the bull tasted pretty good. Cowboys considered them a delicacy, and they often peeled, battered, and fried them on the spot. Today, Rocky Mountain oysters are available at festivals, restaurants, and bars, often served as appetizers. Are you looking for an inexpensive alternative to beef broth? Why not make some beef tea? Recipes for the liquid dated back to the 1700s, but beef tea proved beneficial for the pioneers. They made the tea by boiling thin strips of salted beef, then straining it and serving it warm. It served a practical purpose as a supplement for weak constitutions. Pioneers sometimes used beef tea to increase appetites and as a remedy for illness. Beef tea is just what the doctor ordered. The process for making the tea wasn't limited to beef either. Lamb, chicken, and vegetables could make an adequate substitute when beef wasn't available. Like many other animals the pioneers hunted or trapped for food, jackrabbits were an integral part of the pioneer diet. They were plentiful and easy to catch, making them a quick, hearty meal. Jackrabbit meat was lean and could be roasted like any other meat, making it a valuable food source in the Old West. But like any fast food, subsisting on rabbit meat alone caused a problem for early settlers: rabbit poisoning. Now known as a type of protein poisoning, the condition is caused by eating a high-protein diet with no other nutrients. It mimics extreme hunger symptoms, despite the adequate number of calories provided by consuming jackrabbit meat. Jackrabbit meat was too lean, causing the condition in some settlers during the period. It didn't deter them from eating other critters, though, and rabbit meat is still prevalent in some parts of the world today. Before modern refrigeration techniques made it possible to take it on the road, fresh meat was a hard-earned prize for settlers in the Old West. It would spoil on wagon trips, forcing settlers to hunt when they could. Deer and buffalo weren't always abundant in some areas, but squirrels often were. Squirrels became an acceptable fresh meat option for those days when buffalo just wasn't practical. Hunters clipped the bark off a branch beneath the squirrel, causing them to fall from the tree. Then, the hunters attempted to shoot the squirrels without damaging the small amounts of meat on their frames.
All right, you guys want these fried or stewed?
Fried, fried.
Even cowboys like to have a quick snack once in a while. Frizzled beef made for the perfect hearty snack and occasional dinner. It was easy to make, too, consisting of dried meat cooked in milk, butter, and flour, and served over toast. And because of its ingredients, the dish was reasonably more nutritious than some of the period's other fare. Better yet, the ingredients were easy to transport, as the only perishable ingredient in the recipe is the milk. Modern recipes might add some sautéed onions or peas to the recipe and serve it over a baked potato instead. Frizzled beef can also be made with chipped beef and served with gravy. Our friends in the military may know frizzled beef by a different name, SOS, or on a shingle. Bread and biscuits were just as much a staple of pioneer meals as they are today. Ovens weren't typically available on the trail, so settlers cooked these classic carbohydrates in a frying pan. The result was frying pan bread, or bannock, which is different from the bread we eat today. Frying pan bread is a versatile dish with a simple recipe calling for flour, baking powder, salt, and water. The pioneers used wholemeal flour, resulting in more dense and filling bread. That was probably a good thing, as their food had to satiate them for the long haul. So what do you think? What Wild West food sounds like the tastiest? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.